All right, ladies and gentlemen, there has been a lot of talk in the Wuthering Waves space about what to improve in the game. It's fair to say that Kuro Games might be one of the most receptive gacha companies of all time, where they're constantly referencing all of the different bits of player feedback that they've received, how they've integrated it into the game, and we as the players get to see firsthand how it actively makes it better. And you don't have to take my word for it, right? All you need to do is go to your Echo menu, click the presets button, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. A feature that's been requested in games like Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, ZZZ. Collectively, over 5 years, this feature has been requested, and the WuWa devs, they put it in the game less than a year before release. Just like in the first patch of their second version. And so it's clear that these devs do in fact listen. It's clear that they are actively trying to make it better. And so what I wanted to do was take some of my time to explain 10 things in Wuthering Waves that still need to be ironed out, that still could genuinely be better, and make that feedback packaged in a way that's going to be really palatable to the devs, right? And that's really going to be great for the overall player base and not really bleed into things, right, that are focusing too much on resources or like giving players extra things that maybe the devs didn't have in mind. These are functional changes that are looking to just improve the game as a whole, no matter where you stand across the genre. Because at the end of the day, the devs do listen, and we want to make sure that the changes they are implementing aren't going to do anything that hurts the game or causes player burnout or anything along those lines. And so with that, let's get right on into it. The first change that I am going to be talking about is a pretty simple one. And I think it's one that you might be experiencing firsthand if you are maybe somebody like a day one player. And this change, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be focused on your number of team slots. I'm going to be honest here. I don't think we have enough team slots. I really don't. I think that with the number of different characters that we've had released, all of the different ways that characters can be played, all of the different options for a DPS, Carlotta can be played like a hyper carry. And there are a ton of people, right, that also want to play her in dual DPS with a character like Chang Li, or maybe even a character like Brandt. And if you have one character that you like and you're able to put them on 2 teams and have those individual setups, you're gonna run out of your team slots with only 3 possible DPSs. And ladies and gentlemen, when we consider the number of DPS characters that are in the game, you have your Brandts, you have your Chang Lis, you have your Phoebes, you have your Carlottas, your Camellias, your Zhang Liaos, your Jians, your Jinxies. That alone, the number of DPS characters alone, we've already got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and honestly, you combine these 3, you'll get like 7. That's already more teams or more DPS characters or DPS team combinations than there are teams available for you to actually slot in. This is 5. I'm saying that this number should probably go up to something like 10, or maybe honestly, even 15. The fact that we have more Echo preset slots than we do teams to actually, slot for characters, it's a bit of an issue, especially as your roster grows. And let's be honest here, right? You're going to need a lot more teams in WuWa, or you're going to be able to make a lot more teams in WuWa because the teams also only have 3 people. You don't need 4 like all of the other big gacha games other than ZZZ. And so with that in mind, you're going to be running out of these slots quick. And so just having more optionality, less need to go into like the quick setup, even though quick setup is fast, is going to be nice for players. That's just a short one. That's a small one. But that's something that's becoming even more common, and it's a complaint that we've been hearing more and more. And just adding more of those slots can't really do anything except help the game going into the future. So we've got that one settled. Now let's move on to something else. And that's going to be visibility on your buffs. And we're going to have to do a bit of a live demonstration in the TOA to get the full grasp of what I am talking about here. We're going to have to actually play the game. And so with that, one team that I am going to show off right now, because the visibility of buffs here is good, is actually going to be Chang Li's. It's going to be a combo of good buff visibility and bad buff visibility. Keep in mind, there's going to be 2 main buffs that I want to keep track of here in this demo. The first one is going to be Brandt's, where casting a Residence Liberation gives me a big basic attack damage buff for 10 seconds. And then we're going to have Chang Li's weapon, which stacks up incrementally over time. I've got to keep track of the stacks, and once it reaches full stacks, they get removed after 12 seconds. So that's something you also have to keep in mind here if you're trying to maximize the damage of her using this weapon. And so with that, let's just get into the TOA and really see what some of the issues are here. All right, we're in the TOA, and I'm just going to cast Brandt's Liberation. And what you're going to notice, right, is that I don't have anything at the bottom of my screen. There's nothing showing up here. There's now the debuff from the Thundering Mephis hitting me, but there's no indication of that 10-second duration on Brandt's buff that is ticking down. There's also no indication of something else really important when it comes to Brandt. And that's this. His Aflame buff, where his efficiency in gating Bravo is increased by 100%, and he gains way more attack. He goes from 12 points of attack per ER up to 20 for a max of 2,600 attack from his 1560 that he normally has. There's no indication of this buff ticking down either, and it lasts a total of 12 seconds. Having some sort of indication of when these buffs are going down, when they're this important to the character's kit, is super important, because this character, Brandt, he's a character that can sometimes be played in a lot of quick swap. We're going from one character to another in rapid succession. And when you're doing swaps that often, it can be really difficult to keep in mind just where these buffs are going, what their different durations are at, and who's still benefiting from them. Because maybe you're using an attack too early, or maybe you're using an attack too late, and you're not actually getting the full value of those buffs. You don't really know, and there's not a clear visible indicator of it. So let's see a case where the clear indicators are actually well done. And it's going to be here. You're noticing I have an indicator of Chang Li's true sight, which, let's be honest here, it's kind of not really needed because of how often she gets it in her kit, and also an indicator, right, of how many stacks her weapon is at. And you can see over here, right, now my stacks are full. I'm at the full bonus of her character kit, or from her weapons kit, and now I have that big attack buff going. And now that one phased out and all the buffs are gone. That is kind of what I'm expecting, or I think what should be expected from a lot more of these weapon buffs that are being had on signatures and even on echo skills, if we're being entirely honest. These are significant buffs that have a big impact on a character's damage output. Using your Chang Li skills and using your Chang Li's abilities when she has a fully stacked weapon buff and when she doesn't is a very big difference. And the fact that a character like Brandt will just come in, all you see is his outro skill, right? You'll go through his entire rotation, and you won't see anything. Here, there's no visibility at all. And if I'm doing some swaps, right, between the two, right, and I'm doing some fun things, it's going to be really hard to keep track of these buffs, especially with a playstyle like this. Let's be entirely real here. Are you going to keep in mind the 10-second on Brandt's weapon and the 12 seconds on the Aflame state? When you're going between 3 characters, you're swapping between them maybe 6 times in a 4-second duration. You're probably not going to. It's going to slip your mind, and you might end up using abilities at the wrong time or not getting the full benefit out of them. And so with that, these character buffs and these weapon buffs aren't the only thing. Chang Li is a character, right, who's had a great amount of work done, but she kind of is one of the only characters that's had a lot of this quality of life built into her kit. There's more, though, that can be added to the equation. And that is buffs from things, right, like Rejuvenating Glow. Seeing this ticking down, even though it is 30 seconds, so maybe it's not necessary. Rejuvenating Glow might not be as important because it is 30 seconds, but Moonlit Clouds is. Because this buff of 22.5% attack, it only lasts 15 seconds. And the Heron's damage boost, that gives you a straight 12% damage buff to every attribute, that only lasts 15. These are very short duration, and it is helpful to know when they're expiring or when they're going to disappear. And so maybe it's an option, right? You could say that having all of this noise above your Forte circuit could cause some issues. That's fair to say, right? It could get a little bit cluttered. To see all those different buffs ticking down, it could be overwhelming for newer players that are just trying to put like a meta team composition together. But I think for somebody that's really trying to, you know, get maybe a little bit sweaty, keep up with the meta, play super optimally, it would be helpful. And so maybe it just becomes like a graphics option of some kind, right? Something that shows up in the UI or the camera, just something into here. Maybe like something in like the interface. Just an option that players can choose to be able to have more visibility on their buffs and be able to toggle it off or on, depending on the type of player you are. Just having something in this menu that would let you access, right, that greater information and let you make better decisions in game. So like maybe like a minimal status bar or like a full status bar sort of thing going on. And again, if this is optional, if this is something that players can choose, I don't really see a problem with implementing it in the game, because all it can do is just improve the gameplay experience for a certain group of players. And that's really what quality of life is all about, giving without really taking in the process. So that's going to be our takeaways when it comes to the buffs. Now let's get into something that's a little bit more important. And that's going to be the combat experience in one game mode in particular. And I'm not talking about Wuthering Waves. I'm not talking about the TOA. I'm actually going to be talking about something like a hologram boss. And I'm going to show you exactly where the pain points are when it comes to this part of Wuthering Waves' gameplay. It's fair to say that holograms are super popular, right? They're a very difficult endgame mode with bosses that are extremely dangerous. It is easy to just get one shot and completely obliterated. The issue is, right, you might do something like your Resonance Liberation. Yep, you'll use it in combat, you'll do a ton of damage. But the thing is, when you wipe in a hologram, you lose all this HP. You'll fail the challenge, and then you'll revive. Your HP will be restored to full, but you will no longer have your Resonance Liberation. And so when you decide to go into that hologram and tackle it again, right, you're like, all right, buddy boy, I'm gonna get you this time. I've learned and I've adapted. Well, you can't really fight them until you build up all that ER again. And what ends up happening is that as you're going through these hologram clears, you don't really end up fighting them again until you just decide, okay, my energy is kind of like where it needs to be. I've cycled through my intro skills. I've batteried my teammates. Now let's do the hologram for real. And then once your energy is ready to go, it's not over here. You'll just quit the challenge and then restart it. It is an extra step of clunkiness that just makes repeatedly tackling the same hologram over and over kind of one of the most infuriating things on the planet, because players are dealing with a lot when they get wiped by a hologram boss. First, they get exposed to the massive skill issue that caused their death in the first place. Second, they have to worry about, right, oh, all of my energy just got reset. And third, it's like, all right, now I have to go rebuild that energy after I've just like been humiliated by this AI and I've lost all my energy. It adds so many additional points of friction into the experience. And when you're doing something like grinding the same boss over and over in this extremely challenging and difficult content, it's odd that the TOA feels better to grind than the holograms, when the holograms don't really even have additional rewards or not even resetting rewards. The TOA is over here and has like, it's just far more seamless of an experience because you start the TOA with everything you need. You have the full energy and everybody's at full HP. But over here, it's almost like the holograms are sort of designed to be as annoying as possible to complete. And I don't really know why they're still like this in 2.0. I'm trying to think of a reason for why the devs would intentionally not want to reset the energy. The only thing I can imagine, right, is that a player could just decide to like start a level 1 hologram really fast, get full energy, and then leave. And then they'll be like, oh, yeah, that means players will get energy too fast in the overworld. But it's like, what's wrong with that? What would be the issue with players using this as a way to battery themselves in the overworld? It's not like this is close to anything anyways. It's in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. You can't even go, like, look how far the closest mob is to this arena. Bro is all the way up here. Bro is all the way over here. Yeah, it's not like you're gaining any advantages from farming up energy over here. And so, honestly, I think that there's no actual downside for fixing the energy issue here. It'll, again, only improve the gameplay experience for a small part of the population that's like grinding holograms. And at the end of the day, I don't think Kuro could possibly lose out on anything with this one. And along those lines, when it comes to resetting, there's also something else that should probably be reset in these game modes. And that is the cooldown of things like revive passives. I do think it is odd that in modes like the TOA and holograms, these revives still are on like a 10-minute timer. You have this in Baija's kit, you have this in Shorekeeper's kit, and you have this in Varina's kit. These things will go on a 10-minute timer indiscriminate of the game mode. You die in TOA and you activate this revive. That revive is just gone for 10 minutes, no matter how many times you reset in TOA or where you go. Like even if you go to like a hologram after using it in a TOA. I'm kind of in the boat that like whenever you're tackling this sort of difficult content, this stuff should just reset the cooldown as well, because it kind of just feels like sometimes it will randomly activate. And for 90% of like your actual clears where you are in risk of dying, the fact that it has a 10-minute cooldown kind of just means that it doesn't really exist for 90% of your playthroughs, unless you're waiting 10 minutes between clears, but nobody's doing that. So it just feels like there's a lack of consistency here. And when this is like an inherent skill or a high-level sequence node for a character like Baizha, I do think it should be a little bit more accessible. And I don't think it's gonna like break the game for most players. Because let's be real here, if you're like metagaming about revives and holograms, you'll just use the item. You'll just use the item that revives your characters. So that'll be the whole issue on holograms. Now let's get into something a little bit more interesting, and that's going to be some of the character kits. We're still in the combat section right now. Kuro did something really, really good in version 2.0. They did something amazing. And what they did was they added Spectro Frazzle to the kit of Rover. Spectro Frazzle, right, is a debuff that goes ahead and inflicts spectral damage upon an enemy every couple of seconds and then reduces its stack by 1. Rover basically launched in 2.0, did a soft relaunch in 2.0, adding the Spectro Frazzle debuff to their enhanced resonance skill in their forte, and then on their liberation. Just straight up additions to the kit that in a lot of ways just makes them stronger. However, this is kind of the only place that they've done it. And I'm gonna be real here. I think that there are kind of like some issues with debuffs and how they might be implemented in the future. So let me go on over to the official Wuthering Waves website, and we've got something from them. Wuthering Waves released a whole article, right, about how negative statuses are going to work, really centered around the release of Phoebe, right, talking about how all the debuffs are going to stack up, what the factors are in terms of the damage, and, you know, focused on how it's added into Spectro Rover's kit. They also kind of just revealed the other 5, and I'm going to be honest. How else are we going to see these in the game in any meaningful capacity unless these debuffs, unless these negative status effects are slowly added to the rest of the roster? It would be both a great way to spice up the gameplay of older characters, but then also give them a lot more use cases in the meta moving forward. And I don't really know how much Kuro's going to like lean into the whole like buffing units after release, but there are so many units on the roster, especially like maybe like a John Shin getting access to the new arrow erosion or something like that. Like every tick on her shield when she's charging it up applies it. There are so many characters on the roster that could use this help, use this differentiation to lift them out of complete obscurity and maybe give them a bit of a spot in the meta. Like how Spectro Rover, right, has a spot in the meta alongside Phoebe due to that Spectro Frazzle focus. I think that it would be kind of like a 2 birds, 1 stone sort of situation. Also because these need to get introduced into the game. These need to actually do something. Because right now, Spectro Frazzle has 2 characters that support it, and the rest of these debuffs have absolutely nothing. There's basically no reference to them at all in the game. The only monsters, or the only thing that applies this, are the enemy bosses. And at this point, they just kind of feel like an afterthought. And so maybe Kuro's going to go ahead and just focus on one element at a time, kind of like fully flesh it out, release the characters for it, and then buff the older characters, you know, to have them. The main focus is maybe introducing them as early, if there is going to be support for a new debuff, introducing it early like they did with Spectro Rover. Rover came out with the Frazzle debuff in 2.0, and then Phoebe was released in 2.1. And so it'd be great to see maybe the update before the Havoc Bane or the Arrow Erosion character. We see some older characters, right, getting that debuff added into their kits. Just as like a bit of a treat, a bit of like a preview of what future meta role they might have. It would breathe a lot of life into the game. So that's gonna be that one. And the last thing that I'll be talking about when it comes to combat and quality of life updates to combat is going to be pretty simple. And that's going to be, ladies and gentlemen, adding some sort of recommended skill priority to the characters and to this menu in particular. It is pretty fair to say that leveling something like Jian's Resonance Liberation, his Qing Long mode, leveling it from like 6 to 9 or 7 to 10 is going to do a lot of great stuff for your DPS. That's fair to say. However, leveling Gion's basic attack from 6 to 9 has about the same exact cost, but not even 1 to 2% of the benefit. But players will kind of still end up sometimes leveling things on autopilot, seeing that they need to farm XYZ number of materials, seeing that they need to farm XYZ number of weekly mats, and end up spending it on abilities and upgrades that don't really do a lot for them. And so what I'm suggesting is that when it comes to a character, based off what the devs know when it comes to their design, they tell a player, hey, if you're playing Chang Li, you want to max out her skill, Forte Circuit, and Liberation, but things like her intro skill and things like her normal attack, maybe they're not as big of a priority. Because if you're leveling an intro skill, right, from 6 to 9 or 7 to 10, then that could be another character, right, like Jinxie, who you're not leveling in her most important abilities. And that would just let people get a lot more better spending when it comes to their resources. It would make the problem, I like to call it a problem, with the weekly boss mats only being available 3 times a week, it would lessen that dramatically. Because I'm going to be honest, if you are clearing these at every single opportunity and you have a shortage of weekly boss mats, you're either a newer player who simply hasn't had as many weekly boss mats, or you're a player who's maximizing a lot of the abilities that your characters don't really use. And so having a couple more of those stopgaps, right, like in the character's kit, telling people, hey, don't level Brand's resident skill that much because it kind of really doesn't do anything. And don't level up his intro skill either because it kind of really doesn't do anything. It's going to obviously bleed into a little bit of my profits as a guide maker, as a CC who does guides and advises people on how to, like, you know, invest and how to do things in the game. But there's also a large portion of the population that doesn't look at guides as often, that's a bit more casual. And this is kind of like only something that would help them. Because let's be honest here, some of these kits are really fucking wordy. Some could say you might even need a PhD to fully understand what is going on in just Brand's basic attack. And making it is as easy as possible, right? So for some of those players that might be struggling, what's really the issue with that? And let's be real here, ladies and gentlemen. This is the last thing that I wanted to show in regards to this. And it's a pretty I think it's a pretty conclusive one. Wuthering Waves themselves, Kuro games themselves, are sort of, kind of, already doing this. They already tell people in something like a Resonator review for Chang Li what her core skills are, what her recommended echoes are and their subs and their main stats. They're already doing this as their official materials on Twitter. So the next step is kind of honestly, right, integrating it a little bit into the game and giving that sort of advisory for players so they're not really, you know, wasting their resources when they could be spent in other better places. And of course, right, if you just want a 10 out of 10 a character because you love them, go for it. Just know that, you know, every resource you spend on stuff that they're not really using, you can't spend anywhere else. So that's going to be our last point when it comes to combat. And that's also going to be the 5th quality of life change that we gone over. Now let's go ahead and get into something that is a bit more farming focused, a little bit more exploration focused. And that is going to be, ladies and gentlemen, the 4-cost echoes. We'll use Crownless as an example. The issue with farming 4-cost echoes is that, well, they kind of take a while. In the overworld, these 4-cost echoes will take about 2 minutes to respawn. And when you're on the route of like farming, you saw I got a healing bonus over here, it can be a little bit frustrating to kind of just sit here and wait for the next spawn. So after you kill a boss and you get its echo, potentially, it's going to be 2 minutes before it respawns again. And this is the thing. That causes issues by itself because a lot of players, they might be using this whole enhanced drop rate from leveling up their databank to farm their echoes. But when you get into a situation where it takes 2 minutes for a boss to respawn and there is a 2-kill pity on 4-costs to guarantee an echo, this essentially, if you're farming 4-cost monsters or 4-cost TDs, it doesn't functionally do anything. Because I just cleared Crownless, and by the time Crownless is taking its sweet-ass time to respawn, I could just teleport over to a different 4-cost echo, build up my pity to 1 by destroying it, and then I would just go right back to Crownless and guarantee another echo. And so we're just, you know, for the sake of demonstration, we're just going to blow this guy up real fast. You saw that I had no enhanced drops left. I don't get an echo here. And because of that, I've built up my pity to 1. And so now my next 4-cost kill is going to guarantee me an echo. And so what I do is I just go back to Crownless. We do the whole thing over again. We do our destined encounter. And then I'll get his echo. And the issue with this is if I'm already guaranteeing an echo on every single kill, which you just saw right there, I'm guaranteeing an echo because I'm building up that pity, and I have to wait 2 minutes, the systems aren't really working with each other. The systems don't really make sense. Effectively, this 100% drop rate that you get 15 times a week might as well not exist. If you're farming a 4 cost and you have this 100% enhanced drop rate ready, your best play is to destroy a 4 cost, get its echo, and then actually just AFK and not do anything in-game for 2 minutes. You literally just sit here for 2 minutes because you have a guaranteed drop on every 4 cost kill, and you just wait here for 2 minutes and do absolutely nothing. 2 minutes can be a very long time if you're farming. And the problem with this is how bad this entire experience feels relative to, well, the weekly bosses. It's ironic that every weekly boss, aside from the Bellborn Geochalone, is easier to farm echoes for than the overworld. Because all you'll do is you'll just go into this, you'll select the stage, you'll clear the boss, and then you'll exit out, and then just go right back in. And you'll farm weekly boss echoes, who are, let's be honest, they're supposed to be like bigger, badder, tougher, more impressive than the 4 costs. Those echoes are easier to get and easier to grind than the 4 cost buttons. And it's insane. And the worst part about all of this is that this experience for 4 cost echoes was sort of partially solved at the start of 2.0. Let me show you what I did when Carlotta was released. This is my first impressions on Carlotta and what I was doing with her when I was leveling her up. And what I did was I just repeatedly went into early access to farm the sentry construct. I would clear the boss, I would get the rewards, get the ascension mats, get the echoes, and then I'd be able to immediately go back into it multiple times and respawn the boss as well throughout early access. It's ironic that with early access, before encountering the boss in the story or on the overworld map, it's easier to farm echoes and farm the boss mats relative to after you've done the exploration. It was unilaterally 1,000,000% the best way for you to farm both 4 cost echoes and a character's ascension mats. So you just do that and then repeatedly do it over and over and over again. And it was amazing. But then as you play the game more, as you explore more, you lost the quality of life. You lost it. We still have early access for the dragon. Let me see. Right. And so you can see it over here. Dragon of Dirge early access. Unfortunately. Oh, odd. And for some reason, I just checked the menu. It looks like early access Inferno Rider is available to me. I don't really even know why, but I guess it's there. I guess it's there, yeah. So for some reason, I have access to early access Inferno Rider. I don't really know why, but that's cool, I guess. And you guys will be able to see firsthand what the early access experience was like. So yeah, I just wipe this boss, destroy him, and then I just restart. I'll just restart. And he's respawned, he's ready to go. I'm ready to beat his ass again. And this is the thing. When you're able to do something like this, to both get your ascension mats and to farm your echoes, why not have it for every boss in the game? Or just kind of implement it into the overworld, right? Why not just implement it into the overworld itself? Because look at that. I'm able to farm echoes in here too. Do this. And then just go for the boss again. This feels so much better than waiting 2 minutes in the overworld for an echo. It feels so much better, it's unbelievable. And this is the thing. I believe that me having access to that Inferno Rider, it's kind of a bug. I don't even know why I have it. Because I can't do it for the Dragon of Dirge. I can't do it for the Dragon of Dirge. There are people saying it's for the on-banner character, but I'm only able to do it for Chang Li. I'm not able to do it for Brant. And that's kind of a bit of an issue. Not really an issue, but it's just strange that this level of like convenience gets lost to a player and you can't do it the more you play the game. You can't do it the more you play the game. And that feels a little bit awful. All right, so we've covered another quality of life update that was focused more on farming and exploration. Now, let's talk about something else. And that's going to be a little bit more up the farming alley. This one's going to be echo tracking. And I'm going to be real here. Echo tracking in this game is okay. It's pretty nice, but it's really only that great and it's really only that usable if you're looking for like one specific character or you're looking for one specific echo on a specific set, because it lets you detect every single mob that'll be on the map, but it'll just be that specific mob. And the unfortunate part about that sort of tracking is pretty simple. When it comes to an echo and actually farming your echoes, it's a lot more efficient to farm multiple one-cost enemies at the same time. Go to an area, go to a region that you know that all of these, right? If I'm farming Freezing Frost, all of these different mobs are going to be available and congregated together so that I just go through one mob or I go through one path, I use my AoE, and I'm able to collect multiple echoes at once. Same exact thing for the 3 costs. And this is the thing. There are already a bunch of websites that exist, things like Chi-Chi's Notebook, where they already plan out routes for you that do literally just that. They find all of the different, in this case, Freezing Frost, all the different 1 costs that drop Freezing Frost, show where they're grouped together, where the most efficient spots to farm are, and guide the player on that route. And I think that Wuthering Waves already has a lot of the ingredients to make that happen. Because this is the thing, right? I'll just go ahead and I'll look up one material in my inventory, right? That's used for Ascension. Let's just say this Golden Fleece that you would do for Brant. This shows you all of the collection spots, gives you an icon on the map with this whole little hand thing of where you need to pick. It would be great if we just had a circle like this for echo farming, where it would show you, if you selected 1 cost on a set, it would show you a radial map like this, and then all the little dots for where there are monsters that drop a 1 cost of that set. So it wouldn't give you the exact, maybe like routes that you would see on something like Chi-Chi's Notebook. It wouldn't play the game for you that much. It would just show you a general collection area, right? For 1 cost that drop XYZ set, and then mark all of those individual mob locations on the map. And that would make echo farming a lot less dependent on these sort of like third-party websites, on these third-party features, and integrate a lot more of it into the game. And when the devs have already gone this far to mark things like collection, you know, or to mark things like Ascension materials on the map and make them a lot more seamless to pick up, we kind of already opened Pandora's box, right? We're looking to streamline the player experience in-game, make things easier to do or faster to do without the need of third-party stuff. And if we've already started doing it for the materials, why not do it for the echoes as well, for all the various Sonata sets? Because tracking them one at a time kind of just isn't really the way to go anymore. And for a lot of players, it can make them feel like they're wasting their time. And so making it a more pleasant experience to farm in-game and keeping it all within the game without needing to use third-party stuff like Chi-Chi's Notebook would be a great way for, I think, a lot of players, including myself, to have a lot more joy and fulfillment out of their echo farming. That's going to be my whole take on echo tracking. Now, time for our 8th quality of life. And this one's also going to be about echoes and the data bank, but it's going to be about merging. I'm going to be real here. I don't think that there's necessarily a huge issue or a huge problem with merging, because you're able to just select 5 and get a brand new one. That's actually a pretty good rebate. I would love, however, the opportunity to select a set to merge for. Something like, I want just Empyrean Anthem pieces, right? Be able to select that, and instead of needing 5 echoes for that, maybe something like 10 or 15, to be able to pinpoint the exact set that I want and not choose something like a main stat, just literally choose the set, the Sonata set that comes out. Because there are often times where all I really want is an attack 1 cost, right? An attack 1 cost on the tie-breaking courage set. And I'll go through 100 merges, right? I'll put 100 echoes in, and I won't end up with a single tie-breaking courage piece across any of them. Random everything right now is kind of okay because of how cheap it is. You only need 5, but adding that option for a more expensive merge, for a more selective data set or selective Sonata set, would be a great benefit to a lot of players, especially those that are farming a lot in the first place. It would also help limit the devastation of farming, let's just say, right? All of these Frosty Resolve 1 costs, and then they're all on the wrong set, or they're all on main stats I don't need. It would let me take all of those echoes that I've gotten that are just duds, and then actually turn them with a higher rate into something that I can use. And so, yeah, just make it like 5 or 10 or maybe even 15, and then let us select the exact set that we want all of those recycled echoes to turn into. And this is also another thing. Having it more selective is going to be better for the longevity of the game. Because in version 2.0, this is what happened to our total possible Sonata sets. These were just added to the pool. You used to only be able to get 9 possible Sonata sets from merging. In some ways, right? If you were somebody that wanted to grind Celestial Light, just this one specifically, version 2.0 actually nerfed the data merger for you. Because now there's 5 additional sets that you actually don't need for that one character that you're farming for. And let's just say hypothetically, as more and more Sonata sets get added, this RNG issue is only going to get worse. Because right now, we have 14 different sets to contend with. You add another 5 more in another version, and you're just going to end up with like 20 possible sets. All 20 of them possible. That's a little bit too much RNG. And there should be a way and an introduction of a more selective way to merge to kind of get ahead of that sooner rather than later. So that's going to be echo merging and how we can buff that. Now it's time to kind of move on to the big one. We're going to talk about tuners. We're going to talk about tubes and echo experience and some quality of life for that one. However, my suggestion is a lot more focused on usability rather than the number of resources that we're going to be getting. Because I'm going to be honest, I'd rather focus the discussion on streamlining the overall leveling experience. So let's just say in this situation, right? I am looking to upgrade an echo for Brant. Let's just see over here. Surely I have like an attack 1 cost that can be used. Yeah, I have an attack 1 cost over here. Right now, to level this echo, I have to go through quite a couple points of friction. First, I have to add it by step, and then I have to go over to this menu to tune it. Why not just go ahead and instead of having this entire menu here in the first place, we just do all of our echo leveling right here on the spot? How about instead of when I click this button, I get taken to this menu. When I click this button, I'll just spend the 10 tuners on the spot and tune the substat that's showing up in this box. And then, if I am somebody, right, that's leveling up these echoes to plus 20 or plus 25, there's a button at the bottom that just says tune all, right? So maybe I take it up to plus 10. If I click this tune all button that would be showing up over here, it tunes both of these at once. But then otherwise, I can individually select these to tune them. And then I just get a view of how many tuners I have over here. This would just take away a lot of the friction when it comes to echo leveling, especially if you're somebody that's doing the more optimal method of like going 5 levels and then upgrading, 5 levels and then upgrading. You have a lot of clicks for something that really shouldn't be taking this many clicks. And again, just leveling it up, clicking over here, tuning it, awesome. Way more seamless. And then for the people that still want a plus 25 bang, the tune all button will still be here. This is kind of just removing friction from the echo leveling process, just making it faster, making it easier, and I don't see a loss at all from integrating this at all. So with that, that's going to be the whole echo and tuner situation, really just making the process easier, making the process faster. Maybe I'll get rewarded with a good echo over here. You know what? Just for the joy of it all, let's do a plus 25 bang for the memes. Let's see what we can get. Dog shit. All right. We're good there. I'll pretend I didn't see that. And the last quality of life suggestion that I have for all of you is going to be a bit of a more minor one. And that's going to be something that I actually shrugged off in one of my Twitch chats. The ability to do some better sorting in your backpack. Let me just illustrate the situation for you right now. Let's say that I'm leveling Brant, and so I need a lot of these gold sword materials. What do I need to make gold sword materials? I need purple ones. Do you see any purple ones on the screen currently? All I see are my gold mats, which I have 1 of the sword one and 2 of the rectifier one. Look how far I have to scroll down to see how many purple sword mats I have. These are the purple sword mats. That's where the gold ones are. There's no actual way to sort anything in your backpack. It kind of just shows up in the color ranks. And let's be real here. If I'm somebody that's just trying to manage my resources and make sure that I have enough to like level up a character and I'm using the backpack, this is dog shit. Like, I see the number of gold mats here and I have to scroll this far down to find the number of purple ones. That's just bad. That's just like not good. That is not a simple flow of information to the player. And let's be real here, having some different ways to sort the backpack, maybe by like material type, by I don't know, like date received, like most recently updated. Having those basic filters is kind of something that we see or kind of like take for granted in games nowadays. And while this isn't like a huge issue that's going to plague a lot of players, I do think that being able to sort, at least by grouping, right? Show the gold sword mat, and then the purple one, and then the blue one, and then the green one. And just being able to see it like that if I choose the option to in my inventory. And I know, right? I know you can go to the synthesis menu and then see how many you have anyways. But what if I'm in my backpack, right? The synthesis menu should not be the best way to view your materials. Your backpack should be the best way to view what you have in your backpack. If the crafting menu is the best way to see what you have in your backpack, I think there's a bit of a UI problem, if we're being entirely honest. And the best part about all of this, guys, is that this is just a suggestion. This is an option. There's going to be a default backpack organization that looks like this. We're just asking for a way to add filters, add some additional organization so that players can choose how they want to view these things. Not that they're being forced to do it one way or another. And so with that, that's going to be our final and 10th quality of life that we'll be talking about today. And I'm going to be honest, I think that these are all features that are just straight up designed to make the game better without adding any unnecessary baggage, without doing any of these things that, you know, could potentially harm the devs, the revenue stream of the game or the retainment of players. This is entirely focused on ironing out those small wrinkles, those small crinkles, and getting people the most seamless experiences possible while they're in the game. And let's be honest here, I had to really rack my brain to find all of these. I had to rack my brain to think about what Wuthering Waves actually needed to become a better game, because let's be real here, the devs have already done so much since the launch of the game. They've been adding quality of life every single update. They just added echo loadouts. And so it might seem like I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel for some of these changes, but take that as more of a testament to the devs on doing so much in the first place that there's not really that much to improve on anymore. So with that, let me know what you think about all these suggestions, and peace.